Hello, I'm Andy Falconer. I'm from Middlesbrough and I'm part of a project called Groove, which has been supported for the last year by the Emergence Foundation. So Chris, he's a great delegator, and so he's got me to do this talk about Groove, and it's been a fascinating journey. And so a couple of years ago, a housing association and that Chris knows, he knows the founder of the foundation, they talked about taking over homes in central Middlesbrough and to doing something along the lines of a co-housing scheme with an eco-village right in the heart of one of the most deprived communities in the country. And so this is a community that I grew up in, and I've lived there or nearabouts for my whole life. And Chris and I met because, as chance would have it, a friend sat across a table from Chris on a train. They got chatting, and at the end of the conversation, they realised that they had lots in common and that there could be all sorts of avenues for working together. And so my friend put us in touch with each other. And I've spent my life doing community work in Middlesbrough, and I'm passionate about my community. I'm passionate about the place that I live and where I grew up, and to see the sort of change that we can talk about in rooms like this, and that very rarely touches communities like Middlesbrough. And Chris, I'm so thankful for that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got there, what happened. And so after those initial conversations, there was this idea of an eco-village. So thanks, could you click the next slide? Middlesbrough is a place that for a long time it's suffered through economic decline. There was heavy industry up until the 1980s, and bit by bit that's been demolished in our town, and lots of us grew up with that being the only way of getting jobs and defining our communities, defining ourselves. And as time went on, it became a really difficult place for economies to thrive and for people to see themselves as living in a good community. And so this is just around the corner from where I live. And when I was a lad, this was houses as far as the eye could see. And now it's been knocked down, and so there's lots of interesting takes from that. But what I should really say is that it's deeply impacted the way that people see their community. And in Middlesbrough, I don't know if you can see that, but it is. I wish this was my house. So the council, they hatched a plan to regenerate what's now this big field, and it was in the heart of the town. It was the community right in the heart of the town. It's called Gresham, and that community has it's been a strong community. It's terraced houses that have been there for 120 years. It boomed during the Industrial Revolution, and now a lot of the people who live there are struggling for all sorts of reasons. And so people's takeaway from this corner of Middlesbrough is that it's a place where nothing's happening, where nothing good can happen, and where people actually need to vacate that area. They move away from that community and they look elsewhere. And this is a narrative that's reinforced by the way that the housing associations talk about it, the way that the police talk about it. And so this is a decimated corner in the heart of Middlesbrough, right next to the central business district, so it should be a thriving place, and yet look, the house has been torn down. And so there was this plan to build an urban eco-village in the heart of Gresham, to take a plot of land and to build 50 eco-homes that wouldn't just be about gentrifying the centre of Middlesbrough. It'd be about encouraging people to learn the skills to build their own houses, in using permaculture principles, and in creating intentional community and the chance for consciousness raising within the heart of Middlesbrough. And it was a bold idea, so please will you click on the next slide. Thanks. So this is the area. As you can see, the university, it's the biggest employer in the town, and so they were to build a student village at the north end of the area, and along this front, this is Union Street here, this would become an eco-village with an urban park right in the middle of Middlesbrough, a beacon of what the community could be if we find ways to learn from each other, to embody principles that are at the moment quite unfamiliar here, and to discover what we could do if we were to work together. And the next slide, please. And so we made a start. There was lots of interest, and then the Emergence Foundation supported a feasibility study. It supported Chris and myself to start to look at how we could bring together people who already care about that community, because aside from what people talk about, the deficits and the problems with an area, it's absolutely filled with assets that often get missed out when people talk about this as being an area in decline. They miss that there are people with time on their hands. They miss that there are children with an utter awe for the world around them, and that's a plant that doesn't grow around here. Tell me more about that. And so we engaged in all sorts of projects just to find out what could happen, and we this is Isabel, who's an artist from nearby, and she came along and she worked with some young people to make a horse. She did a Trojan horse. It's like a really interesting gesture a couple of years ago, and so we planted some plants, and we found people in the community. I love my community and I know lots of people there, but this was such a journey of discovery to find other people who care so much about our area and they're willing to invest time and effort. And that spark that we talked about in a lot of our groups earlier on, it's really present. And something really amazing happened with people coming together to discover what could happen if they looked for the good in each other. And of course, things always go to plan when you're talking about consciousness raising, don't they? Is that not true? and so the council, Middlesbrough is a place where people are fearful. They're fearful of letting each other down. They're fearful of what could happen if you let people in too much. Because as the picture showed you earlier on, that was a regeneration idea. And people were kicked out of their homes to make way for this beautiful new idea. And 8 years later, those houses had to be torn down and they've been a blight on the community. And so this idea of an eco-village, brilliant as it was, the council got scared that the regeneration plans elsewhere in the town wouldn't work if there were hippies like us doing stuff. and so they shelved the deal. To be blunt, they shelved the deal because they were fearful that the good ideas they had wouldn't work if it was seen to be in competition with other people having a stake in the area. And so we said, oh, well, that's the end of that then. But then we met up. And there's this coffee shop that we sit in all the time, and it's just this amazing place where brilliant sparks fly. And we talked about, isn't it a shame that the council have put a dampener on this once again? Are there any other places? No, there aren't that many places in Middlesbrough that we could create such a substantial community. And what the brilliant thing about Emergence is, and the brilliant thing about raising consciousness, is that it throws us at the whim of change, and change can be a beautiful thing. And Middlesbrough suffered a lot from negative change and from things unfolding in new ways that we just weren't prepared for. But what happens if we reimagine things on the new evidence? And the new evidence is we can't have that plot of land anymore. That plot of land that we thought was going to be a beacon in the heart of Middlesbrough can no longer happen. And yet, we were together as a network, an ecology of people who cared about this town, about this location, about the earth, about transcending the messages and the narratives that we've absorbed for so long. And so something really interesting happened. We took this tangent where the emergent properties of throwing ourselves together, thanks, these emergent properties fell into something new, something that we didn't expect, and that is a dispersed eco-village. And because time's ticking, we can fly through these, but people have started meeting together in positive ways. They started talking about the spark in them that brings out the spark in each other. They talk about the ways in which we can forget these narratives of the past. And if you've heard of Middlesbrough before, one of the reasons people have to know about it is because there were red doors painted across the town centre for people who were asylum seekers, and it singled them out as being separate, and it meant that people did a quick job on doing up their housing. And what would happen if we were to embrace each other in this community, if we were to look after each other and we were to rise above it? And so this is me doing youth work. I'm a youth worker and I love the energy of young people. They're not weighed down by the same negativity that we've all built up. And this is our back alley. Alleys, I don't know what you call them where you're from, but it's where you throw your rubbish, and they were gated a while ago to stop burglaries, and it made them an empty space. And now, bit by bit, we're recovering them because there are 10,000 people who live around alleys like this in the centre of Middlesbrough. And what would happen if you were to plant things and to grow things and to retrieve the earth and to retrieve connection with each other? So I'm going to have to wrap up quickly now, but this is an unconference that we did about beginning November, and it was just amazing. People who had perhaps never come across each other before but cared about that community. They spent time together. They spent time sharing each other's visions and dreams. And could you click on, if we go to the end, I know we're running out of time, this is just a quick summary. We realised that change, emergence, meant that we had to reimagine the way things were, and that means that it's no longer a single community in the heart of Middlesbrough. It's now something that's covered. It's a dispersed co-housing model that is bringing in people, foundations, artists, community workers, lots of people who care about their community, normal people, to see what could happen if we all envisaged a better Middlesbrough together. So it's springing from an ecosystem, a culture of community and ecological regeneration that we can own together around shared values, co-produce in that space, and to try and make friends with the people who hold the power to make the bigger decisions about where the town goes. And I'd like to finish quickly with, we sensed early on that it's really important to weave in experiments and sacred activism, that there's no division between action and spirituality in our minds, and for a lot of people, recovering a sense of ownership of their embodied existence in that world is so valuable. And so that's what the future holds. We have no idea where it looks like. Thank you.